From the National Catholic Register, this is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
Graduation season is upon us, and speakers at colleges and universities across the country are offering humor, advice, and encouragement to new graduates. This week on Register Radio, we get an update from Register staff reporter Peter Jesserer Smith on this year's commencement speakers at Catholic colleges, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then we talk to author Frank Hanna about his book, A Graduate's Guide to Life. I'm Jeanette DeMelo, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register and co-host of Register Radio, and I'm joined by Matthew Bunson. Hi, Matthew.
Good to be with you, as always.
And, of course, Matthew is the Register's senior editor and co-host of Register Radio. So we're also joined today by Frank Hanna. Frank is an entrepreneur and philanthropist. He's the CEO of Hanna Capital and the author of a book that's worth reading this graduation season. It's called A Graduate's Guide to Life: 3 Things They Don't Teach You in College That Could Make a Difference. So, Frank, welcome to Register Radio. I should also mention Frank is a part of the EWTN family. He is a board member for EWTN. So welcome, Frank.
Thanks so much. It's wonderful to be with you both.
So this is a great, timely book. I think it came out after graduation season last year, so maybe during the summertime, and we covered it back then, but it was wonderful to bring it back, get it on our website, this conversation we had with you last year, and now to have you here today, Frank. What inspired you to write this book for graduates some, I don't know, how many years after you graduated yourself?
Oh, too many to go into. But you know what's interesting? My daughter and her friends have all been graduating from college, and I actually go back to college campuses and speak to students on a fairly frequent basis. And what I find is that it's certain ways we have defaulted to the popular culture to teach our young people some of the most important things in life. One of the most important things being, what is your purpose here in life, and how might you actually become happy? It's fascinating, the various cliches that they get showered with. I have a little thing that I do when I go in to speak to classes, and I ask them in college, how many of you were told that these were going to be the best 4 years of your life? And every time I ask that question, every hand goes up.
Right.
And they have heard that from people who love them and want to encourage them. But what I want to let them know is that's crazy. I would hate to think that after you leave college, the rest of life is downhill, that these were the best 4 years, and the rest of life is just a matter of sort of running out the clock on the game. And when we think about it, we realize, wow, that is a crazy thing.
Right.
Why do we tell students that? And as I started looking at it, I thought, there are a number of things that we tell them that are a little bit crazy as a society, or as a culture we tell them that, and then there are other things that they need to hear that we never tell them. So the book is an effort to really, and one thing it was designed where you can read it in one sitting,
Exactly.
basically. You can read it in an hour. But it's designed to say, here are 3 things to think about that could lead to a tremendous difference in your happiness in life if you'll take a moment to consider them.
So the 3 things, and you're so right. You can read it in one sitting. That's what I did. It's 60 pages more or less. It's an easy read and definitely a good gift for a college student who's probably tired at this point of reading, as they're graduating. But this one's easy enough to sit down and read. And of the 3 things that you say students need to be successful, I don't want to give away too much of the book, but the 3 things in a nutshell: an understanding of reality, an understanding of competition, and an understanding of wealth. And I have to say, of those 3 things, I was really surprised by the second one, about competition. I assumed it was going to be something about competing, and it was really a different take. So talk to me about competition and explain your difference in the perspective of competition.
Well, it's funny because one of the cliches that society tells all of us is that one of the reasons you go to college is so that you can then get out in life and get ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question becomes, get ahead of whom? And is that what life is about, getting ahead of someone else? And I started examining this idea of competing. Now, in America, we almost think that competition is this unmitigated good thing, that it's always a good thing. And I will say that competition done well can bring out the best in human beings. But oftentimes, it's not done well. The entire reason we have this notion of sportsmanship, which has been fading over the last few decades, is because competition is what all animals do. But when the animals who aren't human beings do it, it's very violent.
Right.
And people end up getting hurt when they compete for food or water or mating. It's very violent. And human beings can be very violent in their competition unless they're mindful of what's at stake. And so one of the things I've found is I don't think that well-being, wealth, happiness comes from competing. My brother and I have worked together for almost 30 years now. When we were young, we competed over everything. And you know how brothers are when they're fighting over everything. We don't compete anymore. We don't want to compete with one another. We want to be friends with one another. I tell people, I don't want to compete for my wife's affection. I want all of it.
Right.
I want all of her love. I want an abundance of love. And when you think, what do you want once you become an adult? Do you want your children to compete with one another? No. No, we want them to all be happy. And so it's not that competition is per se bad, but this notion that the way to become happy is to win a competition over others, I don't think that's the way to do it. And so it's a matter of being mindful. We will all be in competitive situations, but if we don't approach it as human beings, meaning we approach it with love, willing to sacrifice for others, and prudence, which is a willingness to say, sometimes maybe this is not a game that we want to compete in.
Right.
The world draws us into a lot of competitive enterprises where all of a sudden we can say, to what end am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And am I losing a bit of my soul in the process? So that's part of what I dive into with competition, because we sort of act as if every ounce of competition that one can go out and get in his life is somehow a great thing. And I think we have to be very cautious about that.
Yeah, well, your book isn't written for an exclusively Catholic audience, but it involves a couple of things that are really rather essential to Catholic faith. I'm thinking of those two key words there of hope and communion. Talk about that.
Well, I'm a guy who I've spent most of my life in the financial world. And I noticed when we had this great meltdown 10 years ago in the global financial system that there were reports that over $12 trillion of wealth had been lost. And I thought, how do you lose where is it? I know when I lose my keys, or lose my socks, but how do you lose $12 trillion?
You don't find it underneath the cushions of the sofa, yeah.
Yeah, it's not under the couch, yeah. And the more I reflected upon it from a financial standpoint, what really happened was that hope in the future was diminished during that crisis. Mm-hmm. People forget, they refer to it as a global credit crisis. The word credit, the root of that word is credo, to believe. When we had a global credit crisis, we actually had a crisis of belief in the future. And the reason the global wealth was diminished was that hope was diminished. What folks don't understand is in any investment, financial or non-financial, every bit of wealth we have is based on expectation of what's coming. It's all a matter of hope, which, as we all know, hope is more than optimism. Hope is sort of a confidence in God's providence.
Right.
And because it's a virtue, you can actually learn to cultivate it. There are actually ways, just like we can cultivate our courage, we can cultivate our honesty, we can cultivate our faith, we can cultivate hope. So if that's one of the key ingredients to being wealthy, to being happy, to being successful, then I think we ought to be mindful, how does one go about cultivating hope? And in the same way, related to that, you referenced the word communion. One of the ways I've found to cultivate hope is to have communion, common union with other virtuous people who are also hopeful. Hope is actually, it's almost contagious. And so there's a mindfulness about this. Again, this is not something we teach in school, but that you can actually go into life being deliberate and say, I am going to associate with people of virtue. I am going to associate myself with people who are hopeful, because that's actually what leads to our wealth. And I just think we don't actually analyze what are the components of our well-being the way we ought to.
Yeah, they're very simple concepts, and so it's worth the read. But we have about 1 minute left, and I would love to get, I guess, a little bit of what the strategy should be for a graduate as they're leaving. What should their strategy be for their success of life?
Well, first they need to get this book and read it. But
right.
After yes, what I tell these young graduates when I see them on college campuses, if you can think about how you can add value to others, it's incredible how rewarding that becomes, not just to one's heart, but to one's pocketbook. The really great fortunes that have been created in today's world have been created because these companies have given people something that they value. And so when it comes to that first job, to going out there and finding something we do well, look for somewhere you can add value, and every day wake up, go into work, and say, how can I create more value? I will tell you this, everyone in my business who is seeking to create value for the company and creates value, they get promoted. Because I love those people. I love those people in my business. So that's something every graduate should be considering, is how do I create value for others?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the value you've brought to this show, Frank. And for our listeners to read more about Frank Hanna's book, A Graduate's Guide to Life, go to ncregister.com and look for the story, How Graduates Can Thrive According to One Catholic Entrepreneur. When we come back, Matthew and I will talk to Register staff reporter Peter Jesserer Smith, who is covering this year's commencement speakers. This is Register Radio. More when we return.
Father Wade Menezes talks about the National Catholic Register.
As the National Catholic Register celebrates its 90th anniversary, I think that says a lot about the publication. It works. It's solidly Catholic. It presents the teachings of the Church, unabashedly so, and also guides its readers to be even more solidly Catholic themselves. One of the major effects that I think the Register has on its readers is that it elevates the intellect. Whether it be a faith item or a news item, it presents the news and the faith item in a very balanced way. One thing that the Register can never be accused of is being too far left or too far right. It is solidly Catholic, right in line with the Chair of Peter, and I think that says a lot about the Register. For a 6-issue free trial of the National Catholic Register, go to ncregister.com and click on the 6 free issue banner, or call 800-421-3230 for your 6 free issues. And as you await your first issue, enjoy some of our online content.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
Welcome back. I'm Jeanette DeMelo, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register, and of course I'm here with my co-host on Register Radio, Matthew Bunson. Hi, Matthew.
Good to be with you again.
So every year we do an article on commencements. This year, of course, commencement speakers for 2018. These are a list of, we always say the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's not always very ugly. But this year, Peter Jesserer Smith did this story for us, and so we are inviting Peter onto the show to talk about what he found. Welcome, Peter.
Well, thank you, Jeanette. It's always good to be back.
So this is a different story for you. You haven't covered this in the past. Usually it's Joe Pronishin covering this story. So we were glad to have you on the beat. And so it's going to be kind of fun to talk about what you found. And I think one of the biggest findings was it isn't an extremely eventful year for graduation speakers at Catholic colleges.
Yeah, so you could call it the good, the bad, and the somewhat bland.
The weird thing is I'm one of those.
Well, I was going to say that we have to take a second to congratulate Jeanette that you are receiving an honorary doctorate from Franciscan University Steubenville.
Yes, I am, and
so congratulations.
Thank you. It is an honor, and it was quite a surprise. It's my 20th anniversary, I guess, from when I graduated in 1998. And so it was an honor to be invited back to Steubenville, but I certainly would consider myself among one of the bland speakers this year, even though it is quite an honor, and I'll of course, try to impart some small bit of hope to my fellow class of 2018. So, Peter, how would you describe, I guess, the top speakers of this year's of this year's Catholic colleges?
Well, let's see. I would say that there are some outstanding speakers that have been elevated in terms of really what the church would like its, the students who go to its institutions to aspire to. So I'll give you an example. At the University of Notre Dame, which, has the distinction of being the flagship, Catholic University of the United States, the university has chosen Judge Sergio Moro, who's a federal judge in Brazil, known for his integrity and fight against corrupt government leaders. And he has a very strict application, I would say even-handed application of the law. And it's important for Brazil's future as a just society. There's a lot of different interests that try to take advantage of corrupt government officials, and it harms Brazilian society. The other person that they've elevated is Sister Norma Pimentel, who will receive the University Laetare Medal, and the university specifically wanted to highlight her as a courageous example of how to generously serve Christ in the most vulnerable. And Sister Norma has done a lot of work at the U.S. border, welcoming migrants and refugees fleeing the horrific levels of violence that have engulfed Central America. But the beautiful thing about Sister Norma, and it's been such a pleasure to be able to speak with her, is that her emphasis on the human dignity of the person in front of her has allowed her to build bridges and make connections on all sides of the political divide, so to speak. And I think that's very important. It's a very important thing, especially for students and graduates to see, particularly in a climate. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And thinking of Notre Dame, I mean, at times Notre Dame's commencement have drawn quite a bit of protest and frustration. I mean, in fact, it was 2009 when President Obama was invited to speak, as usually happens when there's a new president, and that drew, of course, frustration. And then last year, instead of having President Trump speak, they actually asked Vice President Mike Pence to speak, and that drew some interest, of course, because it was out of the norm. But it's nice this year to see that the people they have chosen are really representative of the faith and worthy models for their graduates. Who else is among the mix of Catholic colleges?
Well, let's see. I was particularly struck by the selections from the Franciscan University of Steubenville, and not just because you were in there, boss. But what was interesting to me was the things that they wanted to emphasize with the choice of speakers, and clearly the role of Catholics in media was one with your selection and particularly your leadership here at the Register. But the other one was Archbishop Joseph Kurtz, who has not only been a leader of the USCCB, but he is particularly leader of the importance of the Church's fight for religious liberty in the public square, because without this foundational liberty, we can't advocate for a more just society, a society that is more just and equitable towards the poor, as well as towards those who are most vulnerable at either the beginning of life with the unborn or at the end of life with the elderly. And
of course, the other one that they are honoring is Stephen Barr, who is a physicist. He's speaking at the Commencement for the Sciences. He's someone I've wanted to meet for a long time, so I'll be excited to meet him because of the way that he has combined faith and science, which so often isn't found or isn't heard about in our sort of drumbeat of a conflict between faith and science. And Stephen Barr has always tried to demonstrate the unity there and the necessity for them to work together. He, I believe, founded the Catholic Association of Scientists, or Catholic Society for Scientists, if that's the right terminology. But an excellent speaker, an excellent choice for Franciscan.
Absolutely, he's it's. I enjoyed talking with him especially. It's always a pleasure to talk with people who you realize are exceptionally brilliant, but nevertheless have that talent of bringing things very down to earth. So he's up there studying theoretical particle physics, but nevertheless he's able to quite well explain that the underpinnings of the universe are not chaos and formlessness, but that you find in science that order always comes from a deeper order, and the mathematics that he does shows that this reveals an incredible mind behind all of creation. So he's going to be a very, I think, inspiring person for Franciscan's graduates.
And of course, Catholic University has an interesting take on its honorary degrees this year. I think all of those receiving honorary degrees are immigrants.
Yes, that is true. So the thing that Catholic University is doing is trying to highlight more in the consciousness of America's Catholics that our care of duty for the immigrant is tightly bound up with our Catholic social teaching, and so and relates to the other concerns that we have, such as the right to life. So they're holding up Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles, particularly for his witness on the role of the family, the joy of following the path to holiness. The Archbishop wrote a beautiful letter on that, and of course his advocacy on establishing respect and dignity towards immigrants. So he's going to receive an honor degree, but they're also pointing out some others, such as Tufik Baklini, who is the president and board chairman of In Defense of Christians, the nation's premier organization fighting for the rights of embattled Middle East Christians and minorities in the Middle East, and as well as Maria Suarez Ham, who is the longtime executive director of Centro Tepeyac, which is a pro-life women's clinic in Silver Spring, Maryland, I believe.
That's right.
But these are all examples, I think, that Catholic University wanted to highlight of how immigrants do work for the benefit and betterment of our society.
And I don't want to I don't want to end our show on a negative note, so I'm going to try to ask you to be brief in describing the bad or what may be the controversial invitees this year.
And it's good that you noted it as the bad, not the ugly.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I guess probably the good news is that the bad is not so bad. So, for example, we're not seeing speakers that belong to organizations that are formally opposed to the Catholic Church, such as, we're not seeing Cecile Richards of Planned Parenthood deliver a commencement address. So that's a good thing. We're talking about people that may have taken more public positions that are at odds with the Church, but may not necessarily be obvious, and in some cases are. So. St. Norbert's College invited a President CEO of the Medical College of Wisconsin to speak and receive an honorary degree. And he has many accomplishments in his own right, but he's also lobbied publicly on behalf of embryonic stem cell research. So Patrick Riley of Cardinal Newman Society had some issue with that as a model to hold up to students. The other another contentious choice has been Jesuit Father James Martin, largely due to the controversy surrounding his book Building a Bridge. And Riley expressed some concern that Spring Hill College was inviting him. But on the other hand, Father Martin has contended that he has remained within the bounds of Catholic teaching. And Spring Hill College responded to me that Father Martin is there to talk about Jesus, not to do a book tour. So
Right.
these are all things for the reader to judge and sort out and to take into consideration. But
Absolutely.
Overall, I think that that between this range and 220 Catholic colleges and universities, we do see a range of different speakers and people who will offer a testimony or witness based on that particular range. And I think if I could give the last word to anyone, it would probably be Michael Galligan-Stirrell of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities. He says, at the end of the day, our universities are called to be places where faith seeks understanding, where the Holy Spirit can continue to work, and the essence of being a Catholic is clear and forthright. So as long as U.S. bishops and Catholic presidents continue to work on that, I think we should see more improvement in the future.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you for doing this story. I think it's important that we kind of take this snapshot and find out what our Catholic colleges are offering, and that story can be found at ncregister.com, as can also be found more news, analysis, and commentary at the National Catholic Register. So check out ncregister.com, go to our Facebook page, like us there, and also look for our podcast on our website for Register Radio. Thanks for joining us here on Register Radio on EWTN. For Matthew Bunson and our producer, Jeff Burson, I'm Jeanette DeMelo. Until next week, God bless you.